At 6:34, please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, roll call. We'll start with Rebecca.
Rebecca Johnson. Randy Pelletier. Carol Locke.
Matt Chizokis.
Jay Fitzpatrick.
Eunice Landry.
Pam McLeod.
Tim Broderick.
Heidi Duper.
Lila Acton.
Karen Curritona. Eliza Drolet.
Grace Simonson.
Okay. We'll open for our first public input. Hi, Ryan.
How you doing? Ryan Starkman. I know some of you guys, I'm just here mostly to bring awareness to some of the things that I see going on. I may not be well liked by some people, but I do have 2 kids in this school, and I have one that's already gone through this school. And for a parent to go weeks, months without a follow-up email or even getting answered at all, I think is unfair. Other issues I have is something to do with the hiring process that goes on at the school. I've applied for 5 jobs, coaching jobs at this school over the course of 15 years and haven't gotten one interview. I understand that they don't have to interview me. I just would think that they would at least give everybody that puts their application in the respect of hearing what they have to say. I mean, I don't know how we would make sure that we have the right people hired without interviewing everybody that puts in an application. It's not a voted-in position. It's hired. So that's one of the other things. And just to call out the athletic director and the principal for as far as support to some of these athletic teams. I didn't go to college. I played sports my whole life. I learned more from sports than I did from school. And I think my kids are the same way. And the lack of attention and support they get here, I think, is just disgusting, quite honestly. With that being said, I appreciate everything you guys do and the time you give up. I wish I had the time myself to do it. But seriously, I would just ask everybody to take a little time and look into some of the issues that not a lot of parents are coming forward and bringing up. I have a lot of friends in this town, a lot of kids that play sports in this school, female, male, and they're just over 15, 20 years, the biggest complaint up here is the athletic department. And it's not getting pushed to the forefront. I mean, we do a lot for Bob, which I think is great. I mean, they excel. I mean, I think that's great. We have a lot of sports team here that excel or would excel even more if we would give them a little more attention and quite honestly, maybe even pay the coaches just a little bit more. I mean, we pay our coaches a lot less than a lot of surrounding schools that are not much bigger than ours. Just some of the things that I hope everybody looks into. Thank you.
Thank you, Ryan.
Jason English. For the first time, and I don't even know how long, I can see everybody's face. That is pretty cool. Nice to see you all again. Couple things I'd like to bring up is, it's been 3 years that the pandemic's been going on, and there's still been 1 childhood death. So everything that we did to our children and hurt them, we need to be accountable for that. We need to make sure that we're taking the right steps and doing more than the minimum requirements as far as suicide prevention goes. That is a really big issue. That is not something that's made up. And quite frankly, what we did to the kids for our education did a lot of trauma, and that needs to be addressed. Another thing I'm kind of curious about, and I'm not quite sure, I haven't gotten a good enough answer, is what is the point of having a police officer in the school? I asked this because, one, we're in New Hampshire. I don't even think we've ever had a school shooting. This is like one of the safest neighborhoods you could ever ask for. Thankfully, we're blessed to have that. But you know, the problem that we have is if we're gonna put kids at 15 years of age into the system and hand them over to a police officer and get them right into the law because they have something like a pack of cigarettes, and you know they're not selling drugs, they're just caught with a vapor pen thingy, whatever the hell those things are called. We're gonna, you know, you can try a child at 15 years of age as an adult, and they can serve up to a year in jail, you know. And when we have an officer in here and we have policies that direct this child to an officer, is that really the best interest in a child's, you know, future, you know? Yes, nicotine's bad, you know, but is it worth the year in jail? Can't we just have that be like, you know, a couple veterans that, you know, guard our school if we're concerned about, you know, security for our school, you know, and handle this, let the school board handle it, let our superintendents handle that sort of thing. I mean, first offense, guys, up to a year in jail for possessing it on school property. You know, that's scary. That's scary. That's not good for the kids. You know, I never got a phone call when this happened to my kid. Nobody said nothing to me. And I found out towards the ending of the day that, hey, this is what happened. And apparently the policy is 1 day of a suspension. Mine was awarded 10. And he did have COVID, so they counted COVID as his 10 days, thankfully. Otherwise, it would have been 20. But at 15 years of age, these kids haven't even gone through their U.S. history course. They don't even know about their rights unless if parents like me sit here and try to tell them about their rights. You know, when a kid is going to an officer and my kid goes, hey, I've known officer so-and-so since the 5th grade. He's my friend because I tell him, trust the cops, trust your teachers, listen to them. You know, naive children, right? And then they go and tell them this stuff, and then they can be charged a year for jail. I mean, if we're going to have a cop in here, start teaching kids' rights a hell of a lot sooner, and maybe we should have an attorney if we're not going to let the parents come in here. Maybe we should hire, you know, a paralegal to make sure that there's representation for every single child. I know my kid's not the only one that's been caught with this crap. Okay,
Jason.
One time.
Jason, we're at 4 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Person.
How's it going? David Saul-Frank. I'm here to more or less reiterate what Ryan's saying. I've been up here, most of you have seen me in the last year, and got nowhere with all of you guys. But there was a big I told you so with that one. But if any of you have kids in sports or anything like that, you realize how important it is. And to see, like Ryan said, smaller schools that do so much more to support their players and athletes, it's disheartening. So I assume it's going to fall on deaf ears as it normally does, but here to say something. So,
Thank you. All right. I'm going to close public input. Thank you all for coming. Agenda review.
Motion to approve the agenda.
Second.
I believe the superintendent wants to add emergency operations.
Yeah, we need you to approve the emergency operations plan so we can submit it to Homeland Security on emergency management.
Okay.
And there's no student rep report in the lineup. I'm sure you'll give her a moment, but.
Okay. Any other amendments? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
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 All right. Approval of minutes from September 6th.
Make a motion to approve the minutes of September 6th.
Second.
Okay, I have another correction. So the correction of the correction I made last month is incorrect.
Oh.
I just need to find
Be
it.
sure to speak up for this one so they can
Okay.
get you on the
So
recording.
I'm sure, like, we have a new minute writer, so maybe she doesn't probably recognize all our voices, but just for the record, Lila was absent at the July meeting and did not make any motions. No, July meeting. But in August, I corrected the minutes of the July meeting, which are reflected in these minutes, which are incorrect.
Yeah, no, she's right.
No, it was
You're just
August,
off
you're
by a
right,
month.
you're
It
right,
was
you're right,
August
you're
and
right.
September.
You're right, August. I have no idea what day it is. So, yeah, so I did not make any motions at that meeting.
Thank you.
But it says, in these minutes, it says Eliza and not me. So it should say me, not Eliza, wherever it is.
Okay.
Okay, there's just a tiny error about the future meeting date. It says October 5th. It's actually, today's the 4th, isn't it? Or am I losing it? No, it's the 4th. Thank you. So I looked at that and I said, I think I'm meeting tonight, not tomorrow. It's very minor.
And I'd like to request an amendment on page 5, the second paragraph, when we were discussing the IEPs and 504 plans. I just don't think it really represents the discussion. It says I applauded things, but I also stated concerns about medical 504s possibly being diluted. And I asked if it would provide consistency. I didn't state that it would provide consistency.
Okay, anything else? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? And I'm
going to abstain.
going to abstain as well. Okay, 3 abstentions. On to reports. Finance report, Heidi?
Finance Committee met tonight, and we went over the September expenditure report and revenue report. We answered the questions. I don't know if anybody wants to talk about it, or?
Eunice, did you want to bring anything?
No, it's
Highlight
just,
anything?
we had just asked some questions about the expenditure report related to special education, and the superintendent and Heidi are going to follow up on to answer those questions and resolve any issues. Other than that, there's some questions about in the superintendent's area of the finance report, and they were going to follow up on that also.
Thank you. Any other questions from the finance report?
We also set budget goals.
Yeah,
Oh, budget
actually,
goals.
we did talk about budget goals and any warrant articles, and our recommendation to the superintendent and Heidi to relay to administration and all the staff that contribute to the budget is that we're looking to at least have a level funded budget, but we also want it to be zero base. So don't look at what you had last year to spend and think maybe you could spend it for the same thing or something different, but really start with zero and figure out what you need. So that's what we did as far as our goals for the budget, because we're concerned about enrollment and the impact on the voters and taxpayers. We know we have future plans to improve enrollment, but right now we need to be very conservative with our budget, which actually we have been. I mean, we're talking about an audit report that shows that we estimate maybe $180,000 being returned to the 2 towns, I mean, divided between the 2 towns. So that shows that even last year we were being conservative with our budgeting process, but we need to continue to do that, and really doing the zero base is very important. As far as warrant articles, we've asked administration to look at whether we need to continue funding the athletic fund and also the technology fund. just seeing what's in the capital improvement plan, maybe that we could defer, or talking to technology and finding out if what we have there is sufficient right now for an emergency. We also talked about possibility classifying our building maintenance fund, which is right now for unanticipated expenses, and making that a fund for any building maintenance. So that's what we talked about. We'll be bringing you more information as we get closer to actually bringing the budget.
Thank you. Okay, anything you want to highlight on the revenue report?
The money's coming in.
Okay. That's a good thing. The policy committee did not meet. Do you want me to?
Meet in November.
Okay. So we'll slide the policy recommendations forward. Buildings and grounds report.
I have a written report in your packet from Mr. Callahan. Work on the sign out on the road is complete. Work on the sidewalks continues to be in progress. Regarding the ESSER project review, that's a federal grant-funded HVAC project. The engineers have finished design, and I'm wondering if your Building and Grounds Committee, and if you're on it, you'll have to tell me, other than Mr. Henry, who never lets me forget.
I'm on it.
That's 2. That's 3. Do we have 4? Sounds like Ann.
I thought it was Pam.
No, Ann wasn't on it.
No?
Is that Pam?
Is it you?
Pam, isn't it you?
It was. I don't know if it is this year. I can't remember.
You're the chair. We do have it written down, so we can check. So my question, which we will email to members of that committee, is how do your evenings next week look?
Well, we have 2 nights.
We have a budget
we're
meeting
working
for
on
2.
ACS.
Ah, those are done by 6.
Oh my God.
I already have a meeting one of those nights afterwards. No, Tuesday, there is already a Buildings and Grounds meeting for one of the elementary schools, so that's 2 members of that committee anyway. So, all kidding aside, if that committee could meet at 5:30 or 7, one or the other, for a half an hour.
So you're talking one of the nights we're meeting?
Nope, I'm talking about Tuesday.
Tuesday.
You have Wednesday and Thursday.
Okay.
that next week.
I don't think I have it. I don't know. I don't have my
That's a
calendar in
lot
my
for
head
1
anymore.
week.
See, I'm losing my photographic
You're telling me.
memory.
Are you under deadline?
I think there's.
Nope, we could put it off another week. This is work that will be done next summer. So,
Yeah,
it
I'd
could
rather
certainly,
wait
it
a
could
week.
certainly go into the week of the 18th, or, I'm sorry, it's the week of the 17th. But we're not meeting on the 17th. Could be the 18th, 19th, or 20th. We only schedule Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays.
I'd rather look at the following week.
You lost me. I don't know.
All right, so we'll send an email, and we'll ask for the 4 of you, that committee, your preferences of the 18th, 19th, and 20th. The purpose of the meeting will be to go over the plans for that project, check the scope, and make sure it's going to fit within the amount of grant funds available. If not, then we either have to talk about reducing the scope or revisit the conversation that the Budget Committee had tonight about avoiding warrant articles.
All right. Thank you. Principals report, Jay? Oh, we forgot our student report.
Well, I would defer to Grace. She has a lot of what, if I speak, I'm going to steal her report. So I'd
Let's
rather
let
her
Grace
steal
go
mine.
first. She wasn't on the agenda. I'm sorry, Grace.
No worries. So hi, for those of you who don't know me, I haven't been here in a couple months. I'm Grace Simonson. So looking at different school events that have been going on, September 9th, we had our motivational guest speaker, Ed Garrity, who spoke to everybody in an assembly throughout the day and then worked with about 40 student leaders after his assembly. September 13th was Picture Day. We've had 3 successful PAC activities. 94% of students are signed up for Session 2, which starts next week. Some students I've seen are struggling to adjust with the new schedule a little bit, but I think that overall many people are excited for the packed times, and I've noticed that it has done a great job of bringing together students of all grade levels. I know, like, at least in my packed time, I've noticed that a lot of the younger underclassmen have been able to kind of mix with the upperclassmen, and upperclassmen have been really constructive about like things just to help with high school and actual like constructive advice, which is really nice to see, and what I've heard across the building. And also that a lot of students have been having an easier time learning with the shorter classes. From my personal group and people I've reached out to, I've noticed that a lot of people are having a lot of an easier time just with the shorter classes to kind of be focused and kind of grasp the material. So that was just something I wanted to mention. The counseling office hosted a construction trades field trip last week, and we held auditions for this winter's drama production, and rehearsals are underway. This Thursday night is open house from 5:30 to 7:30, and many clubs and organizations are going to be there representing their organization. October 12th is our PSATs for the sophomores and juniors who want to take them, and financial aid night is on the 27th for FAFSA, which I know a lot of seniors are looking forward to, just because it is a very confusing process as I'm going through now. For athletics, our varsity volleyball team has 6 wins and 3 losses and is running the Dig Pink fundraiser for the Susan G. Komen Foundation for cancer research, which is always a big game for our athletics, and everybody's really excited for that. JV volleyball has 8 wins and 1 loss, and girls varsity soccer has 2 wins and 8 losses. Boys varsity soccer has 6 wins, 4 losses, and a tie. Co-ed cross country is doing really well and has their next meet this coming Friday. Golf is 7th in the division, and our playoffs are Tuesday the 11th. Unified Soccer have been having a ton of fun, and their next game is tomorrow versus Spalding High School. For different organizations within the school, Student Council, Homecoming was last week and was really successful with over 200 tickets sold. That was a really big source of excitement for a lot of students in the school, and everybody was really excited. Over $1,000 was raised, and the proceeds went towards Student Council's future events. Also to fund their future events, like Winter Carnival dances and the other community events that Student Council puts on. They're planning on running a fundraiser that helps faculty and staff clean off their cars during snowy days, where essentially if it snowed, the faculty and staff can purchase an opportunity for Student Council members to go clean off their cars, so they don't have to stand there and do it in the cold after work.
Great idea.
Do they travel to households?
Or Concord?
We'll start taking requests. For National Honor Society, running their annual fall blood drive with the Red Cross October 19th. And we've noticed that this year the signups have been filling up very quickly. I do the signups at lunch, and a lot of students have been coming up and asking about a lot of different questions and are really interested about volunteering. So that's really good to see. And we have Trick or Treat Night, October 25th, and the local cafe that's down the road, Baked and Brewed. We have a food truck coming to support the senior class, which will just be a fun little addition that we haven't had before. So if any of you are around on Trick or Treat Night, she has very amazing food, so I definitely recommend. For Environmental Club, there's a beach cleanup on the 25th, and they're making custom environmental stickers to sell in the Wolf Den. For the band, they're performing at the Dover Band Show October 15th. For our robotics team, they have been getting back into the swing of the robotics season. They've been doing recruitment and off-season projects and preparing for all the events coming up, one of which is next weekend on the 15th at Plymouth State University. They've been designing a custom drivetrain and a new style of gearbox for use on next year's robot, which I've heard from many of the robotics students is very exciting, so that's always good. FBLA is preparing for their upcoming fall leadership workshop. So they'll take a day trip to Camp Carpenter and participate in the conference and the workshops. And they're also in the process of renovating the Wolf Den and have plans to open the school store soon. Their community project is preparing for the Prospect Pride Day, which I had mentioned. essentially goes along with the Dig Pink fundraiser for breast cancer awareness, and that's always a fun day to dress up in pink and black and raise awareness, so that's always exciting. The sophomore class office has a fundraiser going right now for like wrapping paper, kitchen supplies, paper products, running through November to support their class. The junior class office is running a Little Caesars fundraiser through the month of October, and the senior class office has a Halloween dance coming up on October 28th to support our prom, senior trip, and our other senior events, along with the calendar of donations, which is well on its way. The freshman class is right now looking at just getting their officers together and starting that process. And I know from the senior class, we're looking at doing a couple collaboration events with the freshmen, just because we've noticed that it's been difficult for the freshmen who have especially had that crucial time of middle school in the pandemic to kind of learn how like leadership can best work and kind of the guidelines of that. Because I know as a freshman, for me, it was really helpful to see the upperclassmen leading. So we've been working on looking at some collaboration projects of bringing the freshman officers into our events to see kind of like how you can best fundraise money and kind of where to go from there and what's helpful. So
Thank you.
That's great.
Great report.
A lot
Thank
going
you.
on.
So I want to add a couple of things. Freshman class officer elections will take place this Thursday. It's when freshmen give their speeches in front of the class and then we vote afterwards. So it'll be nice to get leadership in that class to get the ball moving with some things. Grace mentioned the Dig Pink fundraiser for the volleyball team. That's going to take place this Friday. It's happening here. And in reference to some of the students struggling to adjust with the new schedule, one of the interesting phenomenons is that most of the kids who are arriving late to school are actually arriving late on Tuesdays and Thursdays, which is the day they get to sleep in. I don't know what it is, unless Dunkin' Donuts and Aroma Joe's has some type of discount from 8 to 8:50. But that's that.
Friday is senior night for soccer team, girls soccer,
Yep.
is having senior.
Yep. And the golf team had their senior night yesterday
Yeah.
at the country club.
I don't know when the boys are having their senior night,
Following week.
following week.
All right, thank you. Next up, we have the technology report with Christy Prosser.
You have the report in writing. Christy happens to
Okay.
be here. Do you have any questions?
Any questions for Christy? We had questions last time. Thank you for coming.
Oh, yeah. So I'll talk to this. We spoke about it in the Finance Committee meeting. Of the 3 districts here, all use the Tyler Technologies accounting software called Infinite Visions, along with a module called Employee Self-Service that allows employees to go in and record sick days or personal day requests or other timekeeping. The Tyler Technologies installations at SAUs 72 and 86 are cloud hosted, meaning that Tyler Technology takes care of the servers and hold our data. The high school's installation is locally hosted, which means we have a virtual server spinning on one of our machines and we host that database ourselves. One might think that it would simply be a matter of uploading the data to the cloud and you'd be cloud hosted. That's not correct. The lowest quote we have so far to make all 3 school districts installations cloud hosted is $15,000. We're working on that, so that's not a final price yet. It is not something we budgeted. So we're bringing it up first at the Finance Committee meeting tonight and now with all of you. This is something that the technology folks think is absolutely necessary. It'll make operations in Heidi's office much easier to manage. Instead of having 3 different systems to log into and out of, they'll have a drop-down menu and be able to switch among the 3 districts. By next month, Heidi and I will work to find savings in this year's budget that would allow this to be funded, but we will come to you whether a transfer is required or not. We'll come to you with a follow-up, but it's a big number, so I wanted to give you a month to be aware of it before we ask to do it.
Thank you. Website?
So I just wanted to mention this. Again, you're about to see draft budgets. It is that time of year at all 3 districts. And one of the things that, again, with Christy's help, I'll be talking to each budget committee about is looking at the 2 funding lines that each district has now, one for website maintenance and another one for an emergency alert system, and eliminating those, but instead replacing them with a single product that constitutes the website, emergency alerting, and a social media management tool. There is a company, for example, if you want to do a little research, called Aptigee that does this. If you want to see an example of their work, you can go to the Franklin, New Hampshire School Department website and see their different schools right there across the page that you can click on to go into each of the 3 schools. We could be very similar to that. Whether it will represent a cost savings across the board or an increase or be a wash, we don't know yet. I find that out tomorrow, but either way, again, it's something I wanted you to be aware of before we get those budgets in front of the budget committees and then ultimately in front of all of you. The piece about social media management is something we don't have right now in any of the 3 schools. I have a particular kind of a pet peeve about how professional educators communicate with families and with students. It's the district's responsibility to provide communication tools, and when we don't, that does not make it okay for people to use their own. It is not acceptable for a professional educator to be texting a child under any circumstances. The teachers and other staff in the 3 districts have all heard me say those words this year. It's important. But at the same time, if I'm coaching a basketball team and the parents and kids are all living on their phones, it would be awfully nice if I had a way to get a text message to them, and these systems do that. So as part of my log-on to maintain my basketball team's page on the website, I could also send out communication and alerts to the players, their parents, and the difference between that and using my personal phone to send that text message to that student is because it's district-provided, district-owned software, we, the district, have a record of every message going in both directions.
I think that's important because it actually protects not only the school, but it protects the teacher or the coach that's trying to communicate with the student, because you have a record of what that communication is. And if the parent says, oh no, they said blah, 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 you now have a record and you can protect your employee.
And I think for a mom of multiple children, it makes it easier if there's one kind of platform versus, oh, I get a message from this coach this way and that one that way.
Mm-hmm.
In a perfect world, it costs the same amount or even less than we're paying across the 3 districts already, but we'll know when we bring you the draft budgets.
I think it's safer for the students also.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, definitely it's
All right, thank you. Special education report.
You also have, in writing, it's on the table, not in your packets. Earlier, you're already aware of the 4 items in Mrs. Gruby's report. The transition coordinator is in place at the high school. She's written a description of his goals for the year. It's a great ringtone. Her goals for the year with the transition program. This is something that is required by federal law, not the position, but the program. So this is our way of providing it. We're actually undergoing a DOE audit right now in which I think we are going to, by describing this program that we've already implemented, address something that they're probably going to talk to us about from the past. The team chair is in place. He has these goals, again, listed on the second page here. And Ms. Gruby for the year. This is the model that you can look for going forward in all three districts. Right now, we have a system-wide director of special education with an associate director. That makes us just a tiny bit top-heavy compared to many school districts where there would be one special education director, but that's what our future looks like. We're in transition right now. This team chair position is the first of what ultimately would be three. Ideally, we would end up with a team chair in each of the three schools. That's a teacher with a lightened caseload, quasi-administrative or part-time administrative, but still a teacher, still a certified teacher, working as an educator and serving students part of the time while doing some of this administrative work the rest of the time, which allows us to have ultimately one director of special education. So that's a additional savings to go with the efficiency that you won't see in the next round of proposed budgets, but you would see in the following year's proposed budgets. So we're about to propose fiscal *24. You'd see additional impact of these changes in fiscal *25. So we're another year away from that. Did I get those years right? I think so. This is 23. Great. The post-secondary program we've told you about. We ordered a van, which you encumbered last year from surplus. Supply chain being what it is lately, we've been waiting for Ford to manufacture that van. We thought it was going to arrive around Thanksgiving, but last we heard it could be here before the end of October, so that's looking positive. And there's some detail here from Ruth about what some of the students in that post-secondary program are doing. So these are students who have exceeded age 18 in their 12th grade year, but are entitled to public school services until they turn 22. So rather than keep them in the school, this program allows our staff to start working with them in the real world, starting to learn real living skills that they will need when they turn 22 and are no longer in a public school. And it's there twice, so there's that. That doesn't make sense.
All right, thank you. Curriculum and assessment, Matt.
Thank you. This Friday marks our first system-wide professional development day. So we'll start off the day here at Prospect Mountain with some opening remarks by Mr. Broderick. Then we'll follow by our main feature for the morning, which is our speaker, Charlie Applestein, who's the author of No Such Thing as a Bad Kid. So it'll be a good opportunity to hear some of the stuff that he brings to the table. If you've heard him speak before, if you put him on YouTube, he brings some valuable information and some quick things that you can take to the classroom right away. And then we'll have our civilian response to active shooter events, CRAZE. I put that in there just in case anybody asked what CRAZE meant. So we'll have that training in the morning. Moving into the afternoon, Mr. Fitzpatrick and I will be leading a discussion with our high school staff. We'll be focusing in on our mission, personalized learning. We're going to do a text rendering protocol where we'll work through a process to come up with a shared definition and understanding of what personalized education is. Once we have that shared definition, we'll develop some factors or indicators or look-fors for in a classroom what personalized education is, so that when they go back to their classrooms, they can start to identify it within their own teaching. If they do some peer observations, they certainly can start to identify that with other teachers as well. And then bring that back. We'll follow up with a self-assessment and then set some goals, and that will be throughout the school year, the first half of the school year. So this won't all happen on Friday, but that's the progression of things that will take place as a result of this Friday. Also going on at the same time, our mentors will be working with the site coordinators. They'll be working with learning targets for the training for our reflective listening and facilitative coaching. Again, they'll be going through a self-assessment and really kind of designing their program as they go throughout the school year with that piece of it. Again, it's a coaching model, so we want to continue to build their skills about how to be a good coach, and part of that is listening and being able to facilitate in those conversations. Again, not only do we want to keep all of our new people to the district, we're hoping that our mentors grow individually as well, their skills, so that they can continue to better their craft. Moving forward to the next early release day on November 10th, we'll be doing a review of the SAT data. This way, it'll allow us to look at the strengths and weaknesses through an analysis of our questions on the ELA and math. Part of that would be is looking at making predictions about what we think the data says, then digging into the data to actually see what it means. Oftentimes we make assumptions, which are great, but then we want to follow the data up to see if those assumptions, those predictions are in fact true to form. And then obviously through that process, we'll look at, what is missing, what needs to change, and what's working. We want to celebrate those things that are working, so it's not always doom and gloom there. And it's also an opportunity for us to begin to look at trends over time to see how things are working, what our scores are looking like, both from the overall score, but also meeting those benchmarks. Mr. Fitzpatrick and I will be discussing the merits of having our freshmen and sophomores take the PSAT 8-9 and our PSAT 10, which is a little bit different what they're doing in October. And that's a way of bettering our preparation for the SAT, and we'll be looking at what does another assessment help, what does it work on, and do we feel like it's appropriate for our kids. The evaluation committee met last week to begin the process of either revising the current plan or creating a new evaluation plan. We created the purpose of our work, we set our norms, we identified timelines. We're focusing on the vision and mission statement as the basis of the plan. The next step was to look at the pros and cons of our current plan and really start to identify what it is that we want to see different. They were left with homework. They were provided with 10 area districts, their evaluation plans, so they can start to review those and look at what other schools are doing to see some of the things that they may or may not like with that piece of it. Our next meeting will be October 12th. Our goal is to have the first draft to the faculty by the end of January. This will allow us to get some feedback from the faculty, make some revisions as necessary, and then put it up to vote to the faculty and then bring it to the board, hopefully in April, but definitely by the May date as required. So.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Questions for Matt?
Yeah, I had a question. So as far as having freshmen and sophomores take a different version of PSAT, what is the purpose of that? To prepare the individual student, or you're going to use that to measure other data points? It just seems like adding testing. I want to make sure there's a purpose.
Right, and again, we've talked very briefly about this, so it's not, we need to do some more discussion, and part of it's that reasoning behind it. Looking at the PSAT 8, 9, and then the 10 obviously is preparation for the SAT. So it's how is the test situated, the types of questions that are asked, things of that nature. College Board will tell you that students that take the test over multiple times typically increase scores by 20 points each time that they take it because they're become more accustomed to it. It'll also allow us to look at the strengths and weaknesses because the question types are very similar to the SAT. So we can start to look at, again, looking at a cohort from 8 to 9, 9 to 10, 10 to 11 as a way of seeing what's going on with that. And then over time, there might be trends. Whether they're different cohorts, if the trend is still the same, then we can start to look at making some adjustments to that. So
that assumes that the purpose of the SAT somehow aligns with what our goals are and what we want to measure? Or I guess that's what I'm wondering.
Well, it's another assessment tool that we can utilize. And again, we're in the infant stages of having a conversation about that. Again, part of that would be, do we want another assessment, or do we need another assessment? What does that look like? It's obviously a lot less of time constraint commitment than it is the SAT. It's not a 5-hour test. It's a 3-hour, 2.5-hour test. But again, it gives us some valuable feedback as well.
So that would be required for all freshmen and all sophomores, or only based on whether they plan on taking the SATs?
If we go down that route, they have to take the SAT because that's the state requirement, state test.
So the other part of that is to be able to see growth. We see where you are in 9th grade, and we see where you are in 11th grade versus just a one-shot test at 11th grade to say, we did it. At least if we're measuring over the course of 3 years, we can see growth to see where our deficiencies are.
Well, that's what I was interested in, following up with Karen's question.
Yeah, I guess I'm just worried, to have a freshman take something to prepare for the SAT seems like putting unnecessary pressure on a freshman to be thinking about SATs already, but if it's to be used for our own measurements of growth, that's something different.
It's not one or the other, it's for everything. Down the road, it's also great to be able to say to teachers, here are specific things that we notice that kids might be deficient in, or here are things that kids are good in. So don't teach dinosaurs again. Let's teach some of the things that there might be a gap in.
Yeah, I was hoping that one of the benefits would be to evaluate our curriculum and see where we have deficiencies.
Yeah. If it's done correctly, it's a multifaceted process that you use to make changes, systemic changes, not just high school changes. It's a lot of work to do that, but we've got to start somewhere. So we're starting with the conversation. And, not to speak negatively about any of it, but we don't know if that's the assessment that we want to use, right? We may decide not to use that and use something that's a little bit less invasive and something that might allow teachers to use more specific data to drive instruction. So,
I know the board knows it, but I think it's worth mentioning that the only assessment that the high school does for the state is in 11th grade,
right,
the SAT.
And the science assessment.
Yeah.
So that was my question. You are going to look at other assessment tools other than PSATs? NEWA, for example?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right.
Yeah, I mean, if an assessment has some value to helping the student learn and helping us be better at teaching, then I would support it. But that would be one of my two big goals. So.
Yeah, that's critical. Okay, thank you, Matt.
Well, I have one more question if no one else has a question. For the evaluation committee, can you just describe what the scope of is, like what particular evaluations are you talking about? Are you talking about
The teacher observation evaluation process is what we're focusing in on. Based off our first meeting, there is a strong push to change it, that it needs to be adjusted, and there's a bunch of different parts that we identified as the pros and some of the cons that go along with our current one. So again, we have members from the faculty, members from the administration. I'm facilitating the process, and we'll be bringing that to you sometime in April.
This came out of contract negotiations last year.
This might be more for the superintendent because he likes to combine things, but have they looked at the evaluation process for that the Barnstead Elementary School?
So actually, no, you're right. I would like to think that I'm doing what you want me to do by liking to combine things, but no, because teacher observation and evaluation systems are all collectively bargained, I think it makes more sense to come up with one, presumably that everyone feels good about, and then as you open other contracts, you can maybe take that and put it on the table. They're all different now. There's a surprise.
All right, thank you.
Everybody good? Okay, superintendent's report?
No printed report from me tonight, which might mean I'm going to be shorter than usual. You have on the table in front of you the crisis response plan. This is applicable to all 3 schools. This includes some procedural information. It describes who the staff are involved on the crisis teams. Let's not confuse crisis response with emergency operations. Emergency operations is how to evacuate and deal with threats and fires and floods. Crisis response is about students exhibiting primarily self-harm, suicidal, or homicidal ideation. We are required by a policy that you approved at your last meeting to have this plan, and during your conversation, one of you observed that you were passing a policy that required a plan that didn't exist. So this is the plan. It was developed by our 3 social workers working together from the 2 plans, which again were completely different from one another, that 2 of the 3 schools already had in place. So this is now just an FYI. This doesn't require board approval. The policy does, but not the plan or the procedure. The social workers, I last asked the principals to have the social workers meet with the members of these crisis teams, go over these forms and protocols, and then figure out what needs to be shared with all staff, probably at an afternoon faculty meeting or something like that, just so that staff members understand when a student is exhibiting X, Y, or Z, here's who I call, here's what I do. So that's for your information. I want to mention in this public forum that Team 309, Bob, the robotics team, is looking for a board of directors member, and that could be any member of the community. It does not need to be a school board member or a school employee, because Team 309 operates an independent 501c3 nonprofit foundation to partially support its operations. So they are looking for a board member, and if anyone is interested, either in the room or watching on YouTube, call my office and I'll put you in touch with the right people. And then to start my piece, which is about what I plan to talk to all staff from the 3 schools about Friday morning, I'm going to start by talking to you a little bit. It is about strategic planning, which we've talked about in board meetings over the last 6 or 8 months, always with the traditional idea that this school would do a strategic plan and that school would do a strategic plan and that school would do a strategic plan. And guess what I'm proposing? It doesn't really make sense, I don't think, in our current climate here. So I am proposing to take a systems approach to strategic planning and to begin with this conversation that I have with staff Friday morning. I won't talk to you again about shared services and the memorandum that the boards agreed to in May of 2020, but I will mention it to staff for those who haven't heard about it as frequently as you all have. I spent some time last week with some superintendents and education commissioners from some other states, and somebody there brought the idea of public education being in a restart mode right now, and I think that's accurate. I think this is, I won't use the word great restart, although that was somebody else's term. We'll see how great it is, but I think it is inevitably a time to restart or even reinvent public education. And here, more than anywhere, you're all familiar with system-wide enrollment trends. You know that the system as a whole, over the last 13 or so years, has lost 27 or 28% of its total student enrollment. And by system, I'm referring to Bolton Central School, Barnstead Elementary School, and Prospect Mountain High School. Alton had over 600 students in 2006-07, had 427 students last year and has 424 as of today. It's about a 30% decline over that period of time. Barnstead Elementary had nearly 600 students back in 2006-07, had fallen all the way to about 450, 445 prior to the pandemic, but during the pandemic we saw a bunch of people move into the Barnstead system. So Barnstead enrolled 496 last year, 469 as of today. So it's a little tricky to figure out what direction that school's enrollment is moving in, although the trend in the system over a long period of time has been down. And here at the high school, as board members already know, you had, these numbers are really small, over 600 students, well over 600 students in 2006-07. Last year, we reported 417 students to the state, and in a month, if the number we have here today doesn't change, we will report 390 students to the Department of Education at Prospect Mountain High School. So yes, the budget needs to be conservative, level, or even cut, and probably more important, it's time to talk about what we're doing here and what value we offer to a community or communities that I think after the pandemic have become different consumers of education. Everybody already knew that everyone's allowed to homeschool if they want to. There have been charter schools for decades. There are private schools, but as of a couple of years ago, there are educational freedom accounts in New Hampshire that will help families pay for private school options. There are more charter schools, And there's been a huge uptick in homeschooling. There was about a 63% increase in families homeschooling during the pandemic, which makes sense, right? If your school district told you your kid had to stay home anyway, it stands to reason that some families would say, well, we'll just do it ourselves. And that did happen. What's interesting is that fewer than 1/3 of those students have returned to public schools this fall. So there was a dramatic increase in the number of families who started homeschooling during the pandemic, and not such a dramatic return to public schools. So again, why are we here and what are we doing are important questions. It is very important, I think, for us to understand that for decades in this country, there's been an interesting phenomenon when you ask people their opinions of public schools. If you ask Americans, I've got data here over the last 4 years, 19, 20, 21, and 22. If you ask Americans to grade public schools in the United States, the total number of people, the percentage of people responding who will say that the American public schools get an A or a B is about 23%. 23% of Americans will say that our public schools get a grade of A or B. But if you ask the exact same people, what about your school in your community, 55% give their school an A or a B. Familiarity does not breed contempt. Familiarity breeds affection and appreciation, which means part of strategic planning here needs to mean getting to know the communities better, understanding what people really want out of a school. Maybe it's not SAT scores. But if it's not, we need to know what it is. So when we talk, Matt and I have been talking about data dashboards, which I'm a big fan of. So we've been having some fun. You're not seeing it yet, but it's coming. But right now, the only data we have is the New Hampshire SAS test for grades 3 through 8 and the SAT in high school. If those aren't the metrics that you value, and let me rephrase that these communities value to measure our impact or the outcomes for our students, we need to know what they are so we can tell the right story, an accurate story about what we're doing. And I know from experience, and I've got a story about this, it's quick, that when you measure something, everybody's heard this before, anything you measure improves, you've heard that? I have an example. At my last school district, we measured student daily attendance and faculty daily attendance as part of our data dashboard. We decided that in addition to certain academic assessment scores, we believed that students learn more when they come to school, and students also learn more when their teachers come to school. There's an idea. And every month we would report to the whole community our daily attendance rate, a percentage, 93.6 and 95.2 or whatever, for students and for staff. And guess what happened over a period of years? Students came to school more often, and teachers came to school more often. So if we believe that those statements are true, that students learn more when they show up, and students learn more when the teachers show up, by measuring those things, we should be able to improve them. And maybe there are other things, and this is why strategic planning is so important for these schools right now. Open enrollment has to factor into this. It's going to be very important next March, sitting here in a school that, when I started, had 469 students enrolled, just 3 years ago. And now we're sitting here with 390 students.
And Tim, I don't mean to interrupt, but
Yeah, go ahead.
we don't have a copy of this, like, these are also members that the community should be seeing, especially coming into budgeting. And the biggest thing I think is making sure, excuse me, that the community does know that these deep plans are happening. This should be in the packet, it should be posted.
Yep, and I'll post a presentation on our website. I'll finish the presentation and make it to staff Friday morning. I'll post it on our website. I'll be talking about this until you can't stand it. Some of you probably already can't anymore, because none of this is new, right?
Yeah, and usually strategic planning has a community component where you do community surveys and get information out to the community, but ask for feedback as well.
I'm going to want people to show up.
Well, I just get concerned that if they don't know and ask, they're not gonna know, they have to dig to find it, and I think that's one of the biggest issues.
Yep. During strategic planning, so the other thing is we talked about strategic planning consultants. We have the ability to do this sitting here in this room, so we'll do this, if that's okay with you. We've done it before. other places, we can do it here. If it's not SAT scores, we need to know what it is. I can't emphasize that enough, right? We need to be able to talk in plain language. You know, I've read dozens of school mission statements, and they all sound fancy. But I'll stop, I'll be done now, but I was at a speech by a researcher named Yang Zhao years ago in a state where the statewide school mission was for all students to be college and career ready by such and such a year, which, that sounds like a great idea, right? We want everybody to be ready for college and ready for career. It's not true. Nobody's ever done that. Nobody's ever had 100% of students graduating high school ready to be admitted to a four-year college or ready for any career they want. It's not reality, right? And Yang Zhao said, I've talked to thousands of parents over the year. They want students move out of my basement ready. And I would like to be able to relate to these communities in a way that everybody can relate to, like that. What do we really want for our kids? High SAT scores? Okay, maybe for some of them, but what do we really want for our kids? Is it, sorry, I've got a lot here. Do they know how to talk and listen to others from all different walks of life, right? That's kind of plain language, right? I can relate to other people. Okay, that makes sense. Do they learn from setbacks and not give up? It's been trendy to talk about grit and perseverance, and that's nice, but what does it mean? I just think we need to approach open enrollment by differentiating this school. I'm going to go back to one thing. I already said I'd be done. I'm going to go back to one thing, and it's that gap between people's perceptions of all public schools versus their own public schools. In an open enrollment future, where any student who can get themselves here can apply and be admitted and attend here, which means tuition revenue to offset the budget. In that environment, you've got to be able to demonstrate value. It's just like being in any other business. A business, though. Not a public school where your enrollment is guaranteed every year. A business. You've got to be able to demonstrate value. And that means understanding, what do we want to achieve? What are the measurements we can use to figure out that we're achieving whatever those things are? And then how do we communicate that so that everybody can understand in plain language, so that now families, students who live in the catchment area of a high school that for whatever reason they may not feel like is a great fit for them can evaluate whether or not we might be a better alternative. That's it for me.
Everything you can do to faculty? It's an honest question.
So I have a question. So when you're talking about combining the districts, I guess one concern I have is just how we make a distinction between what the elementary schools need versus the high school. So I would hope that there's some separation there as far as the plans in that way.
I'll give you a schedule at your next meeting, but I would anticipate a system-wide meeting to begin with, separate school level meetings at each, and then end with a system-wide event. So probably a total of 5 strategic planning meetings, and then the plan itself with sort of a combined overview, and then school-specific pages or sections, and then a system-wide conclusion. Because you're absolutely right, Karen, that we have a school that desperately needs some capital improvements, whether it's renovation or expansion or whatever, and 2 others that don't. So there do need to be these 3 different roads in the middle.
And also, I assume this is the plan, but I want to say it out loud. You know, it's nice to make a strategic plan that's in a nice packet and sits on the shelf, but I hope that this will be something that has actionable steps with measurable dates and goals to meet, and accountability. Because I think otherwise, that makes it a living document, right? And it doesn't mean you get it all right the first time and there's not an evolution along the way, but at least you're setting some goals and some steps and some timelines for things to happen. I think that's important to include in it.
So, yes, but a strategic plan should not be a task list. If you can say the strategic plan is finished, then it's not strategic. A strategic plan should set direction and establish priorities so that when something that we didn't expect comes up, any member of the staff or the community can understand, okay, this is what we want to achieve, this is where we're headed, so therefore that this is how we might react to these unforeseen circumstances. So yeah, we have to have certain things that need to get done, right? And we can hold ourselves accountable to those things. But it's also very important that a strategic plan is really about a direction that can be clearly communicated to everybody, parents, students, staff, everybody, so that if it comes time for changes, people have a context for those and understand why changes are happening.
Right, in the context of if your goals reveal changes needed, then those create the action steps. I mean, that should be, that's what I mean, yeah. And also, you know, as we're looking at what we want to measure and what we want our students to have in life, I hope we can include, you know, a social, emotional part. I mean, what we want them to be happy, to have happy lives. That's what everyone wants. So to build into that, how we're going to build a community based on kindness and compassion and empathy for self and others, you know, should be a big part of this.
I also think that for all the work, although it failed, that we did trying to attract Newt here, we obviously were able to sell this school very easily to the group of very well-educated, very detail-oriented people that came to visit this school, part of their committee. They were totally sold on this school. And I think we can learn from that because we must be doing some things right.
Okay. So are you planning to have community forums? Or
Oh, absolutely.
not just
Yes.
sending out
But-
questionnaires? See, that's where the piece
No,
of strategic
so
plan.
the questionnaire approach, so look, it's not like we didn't do anything during COVID. The joint board already agreed to the shared services MOU. If that's not the first focus of this strategic plan, what are we doing, right? So it really, it would almost be, well, not insulting, almost counterproductive to ask people, what should the big ideas be? It probably makes more sense to say, here are the big ideas we've been working on. What do you think of them? What should we add? What should we change? But I think to start, you know, to pretend we're starting from scratch would be just that, pretending.
No, right, I
Yeah.
agree.
So I think, and to me, it's an open invitation. And I already have buckets. I've already been working on this. I've already got sort of buckets created. Some of them have to do with non-academic programs and whether or not we're meeting the community's needs in some of the things we do that aren't classroom oriented. And if we're not, those things need to be part of this plan.
Well, I mean, to Ryan's point, we need to start talking about how we promote our sports. You know, how many people knew there were senior nights coming up? Other than the fact I'm a grandparent, I wouldn't have known. You know, the community come out and support them or not. When I go to a soccer game, there's probably 5 people there, not even parents. It's like, okay, you know.
When the first time I described open enrollment to the high school staff on opening day, I talked about a couple of schools when I grew up in New Hampshire that everybody thought of, 2 high schools in New Hampshire that come to the top of my mind that just seem a little bit different, even though they're public high schools. And my point was, and the question I asked the faculty is, how do we become one of those? How do we describe ourselves in a way so that someday people might think of Prospect Mountain High School the way they think of one of these other schools that students from multiple towns attend. We do have the raw materials here. We're not perfect, sure, but we do have the raw materials here. We have a fabulous building. Most schools don't look like this, and that is worth a lot.
We have a fabulous building, but if you run our district's scores, they're very low. So the building can be as beautiful as you want, but if you don't have academic.
So Rebecca, we just looked at it today. Part of the dashboard we will give you with data on it compares us to 4 or 5 of the closest districts. And based on the assessment we looked at today, I don't remember which one it was, we're within the margin of error of the other top school in the group, with 3 or 4 others below both of us. So I'm not going to argue that we're great at everything, because we have some test scores that I never want to see again, no question about it. So don't take this as, but it's not all bad.
We talk assessments for the students, but regards to the, does our staff get evaluated? Do they have assessments on a yearly basis? I mean, are we?
Yeah, that's
So
the
yes.
evaluation.
So the
systems
committee
are.
that Matt is facilitating, that he just talked about tonight, is to revamp that process. Yep.
The teachers
And then that
are
has to
always
be
evaluated.
ratified by the Teachers Association and approved by the joint board, probably April or May. Yep.
All set? Okay. All right, so we have action items, emergency operations plan.
You have it in your shared drive. Jane informed me that in the past, because it is a confidential document, it's allowed to be kept confidential. You haven't brought printed copies. It does require board approval so that we can submit it to Department of Homeland Security and Emergency Management. It is, again, with apologies to Mrs. Landry, it's the same document for all three schools.
That was a compliment, will you stop it?
Because when the fire alarm goes off, you do the same thing no matter what school you're in. But the maps are different. So when the fire alarm goes off and you leave the building, it tells you a different place to go depending on which school you're in. So this one is the same as the other two, but the maps are different.
Okay. Do I have a motion?
Oh, I make the motion to accept the emergency operations plan as presented.
Any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye.
We're missing Jason.
Any opposed? Faculty staff handbook.
Your last meeting, members of the board wanted the changes from the previous year to be called out. So there's a memo here provided by Jay and Amanda that does that. I also have a copy of the previous one if anyone actually wants to look at any part of it. But here's some more. That's the new draft. It's in your packets, right?
Yeah, but I think it has.
Behind the memo.
Yeah, it looks like this.
Yep. There are a lot. Jay told the truth.
What's your pleasure, everybody? Do you want to have Jay go through these or ask questions? What would you like?
I went through them fairly quickly today, and I didn't see anything that was questionable. I felt
I have a
comfortable.
question, of course. I have a question. On page 2, classroom expectations. I was just wondering, because we talked a lot last meeting about cause, and kind of those universal accommodations and how those would be built into what the teachers are doing on an everyday basis. Is that something that is addressed in the handbook? Or should it be, or?
It wasn't, because of the overlap of the timing that we made changes to when we were simultaneously working on cause, so, no.
So that's something we put in next year, or?
We certainly can, yep.
And my other question was on, page 4, grades. I think this is something that came up in conversation before about academic interventions and consistency between different teachers and whether a student would be missing one assignment or more, and that perhaps it's dependent on what the teacher's preference is. Here it states is missing 2 or more assignments or failing a class. So I just want to make sure that we're being consistent between the student handbook and the faculty handbook.
Yeah, the verbiage might be different between this and what's in the handbook, because I believe we changed the student handbook after your suggestions, and I don't believe it was changed in here to match the changes that we changed here at the board level. What was communicated to staff was using your best judgment. You don't have to give an intervention after one missing assignment, but we do expect you to address it with students, and we're monitoring that. There are some who are holding kids accountable to one missing assignment and then assigning an academic intervention, and then there are some who are letting several assignments go unaddressed before they're doing anything.
Yeah, I guess that brings me back to the discussion we had, that how do students know the expectations if it's so different between every class? You know,
Teachers are telling them specific to that class. And so it is different from class to class. I know what you're saying, the point that you made last time, it should be consistent throughout all classes. It's tough to have something in black and white that is consistent to all classes, all grade levels, all ability levels.
Jerry, they're giving out a syllabus, I think we talked about this before.
They do, yes.
At the beginning, right?
Yes.
Yeah, and having looked at my freshman's syllabus from multiple classes, they're all very, very different. Yeah, I just think for the students, it would be helpful to have, you know, at least syllabuses that are more consistent from class to class, at least the same format. You know, obviously there'll be differences depending on the type of class, you know, art versus math versus science, there are gonna be some differences. It seems like for the students to understand what the expectation is, it varies drastically across the board. I just think it would benefit students to have some more consistency. But I just wanted to make sure that we were being consistent between what we said in the student handbook versus what's in the faculty handbook. But I don't remember what exactly it said in the student handbook, so someone has that.
Do you feel like they're consistent between them?
Between
There's the
books or
word.
between courses?
No, but between the two handbooks. Because it says academic interventions. The word must is there, so it sounds very, you know.
Yeah, again, I think Amanda had cut and pasted what came out of the handbook, put it into this staff handbook. Then we came to the board to get that approved, and never went back to this to make those changes.
So I'm wondering if we can ask that the changes be
We
looked
certainly
at
can.
and just be consistent.
The other thing I want to point out is that this is something that's given to staff only. It's not distributed to students. Any of the things, this document has been, it's been a challenging document over the years, and it actually hasn't been managed by the administration. This has always been something that has been handled by HR, because most of what this book consists of are components from the CBA, which it's not ours to put out there. And so we've removed a lot of student-related things from this handbook and focused more on the adult side of things. And there's still things in here that I would say aren't relevant to faculty and staff. But because we're busy opening school and writing handbooks that are specific to students and parents, you know, this was an afterthought for the local administration to write this. But the faculty staff handbook should really be about what's in the CBA, what they can do, what they cannot do, consistent with the rules of the school that are based on board policy.
Yeah, I think we're open to revising the spirit of the handbook, you know, looking forward. Any other questions or comments?
So we have this goal of having all the accommodations for all the students, not just 504, not just IEPs, correct? So how are we communicating that with the teachers if not through some kind of guidelines? So what Karen's saying is it's inconsistent, and you're saying the same thing.
Yep.
So how can we make it more consistent? Not necessarily through a handbook, you're right. I mean, if you want this handbook just to be about what the contract is about, then you eliminate things like the grading and you put it somewhere else, I guess, because again, Ruth's has a very lofty goal to have everyone on board with this, and I think it's a great goal. So how do we achieve that through communication with the staff? This isn't going to do it, evidently.
Right. the way that we do that is in person and in training. On opening day this year, we addressed it. We went through cause. We solicited feedback for people. We then have met with smaller teams. We've met with specific departments, solicit more feedback. Amanda went in and met with every student in every class. And now we're working on what's going to be our most efficient, effective way to communicate with parents as well. So it's not a one and done. We did something once. It's going to be a continuous, ongoing effort.
Should it be part of the evaluation process?
Well, and I think that's maybe something that comes up in discussion right now.
Having been an administrator for years, it's like, you know, if you want them to do this, and you ask yourself, what am I observing? Am I observing what we're asking them to do? That's real evaluation.
Yeah, and I think it's something that will come up in that committee meeting. Right now, we can't slide it in there,
But it's worth discussing
Absolutely.
with the committee about, you know, Ruth's MOU and wanting this to be a goal. It should also be a goal of the teachers. They need the buy-in. So how are they going to buy into this? It's
Do we have a motion and a second on the table?
We do not. I make a motion to accept the changes to the faculty staff book. That's faculty staff handbook.
Second.
I wonder if we want to just ask that this one section be consistent with the student handbook? Or at least no glaring inconsistencies between the two?
Already noted.
Noted? Okay. All right, any other comments or discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. Snowplow bid.
I actually, probably going to steal Heidi's thunder right now, but I did talk to her earlier today for clarification on the bid and what her recommendations were. And based on what we've done in the past for snow plowing, we obviously only have one bid. So I would make a motion that we accept the bid from Alton Excavation for actually a total amount of $54,450. So that includes not just it would be a 2-year contract. He had given the base price, which was $46.50, but really what we're looking for is the sand and salt mix. So we're looking at a contract for the $48,950 plus the cleanup of the sand for $5,500. So the total amount would be $54,450. And I will move that.
I'll second that.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Thank you.
And a thank you to Heidi.
Oil bid?
Oh, that's me. Sorry.
Yeah.
We just need to reconfirm, reaffirm the oil bid. Everybody here, except for Karen, I heard back and was in agreement. So if you could all go around and agree again. The price is for $3.62.3% or cents, sorry, 3.623 per gallon.
Could I have a motion?
I make a motion that we accept the oil bid as given to us by Heidi.
Second.
Okay. And we'll go around and reaffirm our original votes. Start with Eliza.
Yes. Can I vote now? Yes.
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 Okay, thank you. Special Education Memorandum of Understanding.
So this is unchanged since you saw it last month for the first time. I did hear back from the Joint Board's attorney who blesses these changes in this document as written. So the only change to my memo is that under next steps, instead of I'm going to check with your lawyer, I wrote I did check with your lawyer. Everything else is the same. And we took the typewritten MOU and turned it into an electronic file.
I make a motion that we accept the special education MOU as read.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Early graduation request from Ethan Kennerson. It's in your packet, so I'll look for a motion when you're
I'll
ready.
make a motion that we accept the request for the early graduation from Ethan Kennerson.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Personnel. We have 2 resignations, 1 new hire, and 1 coach.
Make a motion to accept the personnel report as presented.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? We are at our second public input.
Jason again. So when we talk about things like kindness and empathy and wanting to bring kids into our schools, and we do things like surveys that show that 70% of the community didn't want masks in our central school, and you continue to not listen to the community, you continue to fire good coaches. We want stronger sports, athletic programs. This is how we get kids back into the schools. Funny thing is I'm already paying $1,000 a month for my 3-year-old to go to daycare. And for the first time in my life, I'm actually considering not putting him in school and taking that $1,000 a month and just going private. Because the last few years have been rough. It's been rough for the kids. It's been rough for the parents. You ask for our opinions and things. Last summer, we saw families bringing in evidence against the soccer coach and inappropriate behavior there, yet he still got to coach. You want a better relationship with the community, you want to grow the school, you got to start listening to them. You got to start valuing our opinion and not some national this or national that or CNN. We have to pay attention to what's going on here. That's important. Thank you.
Thank you, Jason. Any other input? Okay. Seeing none, I'll close public input. Future agenda items?
Not gonna be here.
What's that?
I won't be here. Sorry, I can't add to the agenda. It's gonna be an agenda, Carol's not here.
Other business, and do we need a non-public tonight?
You don't need it, it's up to the board. You were talking about a school security related issue at a previous non-public. At some point you'll want to revisit that, but whether that's tonight or not is entirely up to you.
Preferences?
Yeah.
Yeah,
We've
later?
prepared it based
Okay.
on what we're given to review.
All right. We'll punt that for later. Next meeting date will be November 1st, and I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you.
What time is next week?
The budget?
4 o'clock on Wednesday.